Good afternoon. I'm Tracey-Lee Brown, a director in PwC's Governance Insight Center. Today, we'll be contrasting some findings from our top surveys, and joining me are my colleagues and the authors of these surveys. First, Catie Hall, the author of our annual Corporate Directors Survey, where we surveyed about more than 600 public company directors.
That's right.
And Carin Robinson for our Board Effectiveness Survey, and we surveyed more than 600 C-suite executives. So welcome to you both. Thank you for joining me. I always find it interesting how boards and executives view board performance. So with that, let's jump right in. The first point is around board refreshment. So we had asked whether at least one director on the board should be replaced. And nearly half, 45% of directors said yes and agreed. And when we asked the C-suite executives the exact same question, a whopping 89% said yes, at least one director needs to go. So, Catie, let's start with you. Why do directors feel that way, and what can be done about it?
Right. Well, directors are pretty hard on themselves, but not as hard as executives are on them. And maybe first level setting that this number has hovered around that 45 to 50% for the last 10 or so years that we've been doing the survey. So it's nothing new, which tells us it's a persistent issue for directors. Turnover is low and slow, and there are refreshment mechanisms, but they're limited and they're imperfect. That said, the two mechanisms that we would point to or potential solutions for these are one, director assessments. We know there's been an increase in the number of directors that are performing individual assessments, and that's great, but you have to do something with the outcome. If you're doing them, you've ticked that box, but you don't do any follow-up with the results, then they're not going to lend themselves to any type of refreshment. The other piece is board leadership, whether it's the independent lead director or if you have a non-CEO board chair, looking to them to have those hard discussions. Directors have told us it's hard to be frank in the boardroom, but without that honesty and sort of candidness, we're not going to see that refreshment.
Yeah. Carin, from your side and the executives?
The reality is that tenures are long. So if you look at the annual rates of turnover in the S&P 500, it's remained consistent at 7%. So that's not new. But I do think if you look year over year at our survey results, it does indicate a need for changes in the board composition. And these needs seem to be accelerating, or they're just becoming more obvious through whether it's the increasing risks the boards are overseeing and their areas of oversight. So I think, executives may be anxious to really look at replacing some of these long tenured directors with newer skill areas where there's gaps, where they need experience, whether it's AI, whether it's ESG, cyber.
Yeah.
To James, just a few. I mean, Catie, you mentioned the board assessment process. So interestingly, executives, they do view this process pretty negatively. If you look at our survey results, so 61% don't trust board self-assessments to influence change, and 64% don't trust their boards to remove underperforming directors.
Yeah.
And we know in the director survey, only 11% of directors said they actually did. So I think given these results, boards should maybe think a step further and really consider individual director assessments. Because I think this is where you're going to see the value of identifying directors' strengths and weaknesses, thinking about developing sort of customized development plans and a possible exit. And I know a lot of companies are not doing that today, but I think boards will see there's a lot of impact in doing those, whether it's through, I know as a starting point, a lot of boards will look at getting a third party or general counsel to help with those.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it too is just the stigma around knowing when it's your time to go, or that there isn't necessarily a negative stigma around stepping down and leaving that seat for a fresh voice. So that's part of it as well in the culture side.
Yeah. And speaking of fresh voice, the other point was around board diversity, right? So from our directors survey, 82% of directors feel that a diverse board enhances board performance. However, only 20% of executives feel that their board is diverse enough. So again, a big disconnect there. Carin, do you maybe want to add anything there?
Well, and I think the good news here is that even though only 20% of executives think their boards are diverse enough, we did ask a question where 60% do trust their boards to at least prioritize board diversity. Yeah. But yes, I think there's still a way to go here. And I think the survey results do point to some pretty big obstacles. Again, the number one reason with executives, they cite long tenured directors' reluctance to retire. as the number one obstacle. So I think tying back to our conversation around board refreshment, over half of directors also agree that they can achieve diversity through attrition. It's freeing up that spot for a diverse candidate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's that. And then when you have those seats free up, you have an expanded pool of candidates. So it's not just those folks who were already directors, but looking at sitting executives, and even among executive ranks, sometimes you don't have that diversity. So looking maybe at a level below the C-suite, and then having a mentorship program to really help those individuals. And then also succession planning, thinking about when you might have seats come up, and also thinking about emergency situations and not waiting until then to identify diverse candidates.
Yeah. Carin, you had mentioned risks in the beginning. So thinking about ESG as a top risk. So 71% of directors feel that ESG does not get sufficient board attention, and only 11% of executives feel that that's the case. So Catie, let's start with you. What do you think?
Right. I think they've had enough.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you think about a director's agenda, they've got a lot of topics that they're covering. And if I'm putting myself in a director's shoes, I've been hearing a lot about climate and ESG over the last couple of years with what's happening both here domestically as well as abroad.
Yeah.
So there could be some conflating that we're hearing about it a lot. We've got this, we've got it covered. A growing number of directors told us in the survey that they're more comfortable and confident overseeing forthcoming mandatory disclosures. So they're feeling good about that. At the same time, though, about a third told us that they may not necessarily fully understand climate risk and strategy. So it could be a case of they don't know what they don't know, and there could be a gap there, either in terms of reporting or education from management.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, those numbers are pretty shocking, right? I mean, that's a huge disconnect. But I think we do know that ESG is a priority for both directors and executives. But it is interesting that our surveys, are telling us not only do executives think directors don't spend enough time on ESG, but that they don't think they have enough understanding and expertise in this area. So, Catie, you just pointed out, even directors don't think they have enough understanding in climate, and for example. So I think there is a possible gap in education that kind of points to the results. I think the current and pending climate disclosure rules as well, I think executives have expectations around these areas and what the board should be doing and providing more attention so that they're fully prepared. So I think, if you think about what can we do in these areas, I think boards should consider if they need additional expertise in these areas, and at the very least, think about their holistic plan for upskilling the board, and particularly the group or the committees that's overseeing these areas. And I think the results obviously indicate some work on the management side as well, and how they present these topics and the best use of the board's time. And then obviously the perceived sort of attention and understanding by the board.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, we've only pulled out 3 data points, but there's a lot in both surveys. So I would definitely encourage our viewers to take a look at both surveys. But thank you both for joining me. I appreciate the time. Thank you.